Welcome everyone to the first ever DX Cafe event. I am Matthew McQueenie from Conabos. The DX Cafe community will seek to bring together marketers and technologists through digital and real life events, much like this one, social engagement, community spotlights, and ongoing conversation. We want to be educational, entertaining, interesting, and we will seek to act as a translator between marketing, technology, and of course, finance. Joining me today is Dennis Augustine, partner at Conabos, CX architect, and six-time Sitecore MVP. I will be out of breath if I have to say a few more things, but he's a good guy. Anyone in this industry has either heard a lot about or has started to hear about headless, Jamstack, and Composable DXP. In this conversation, Dennis and I will focus on the subject of the DXP. And we hope to convince you that there is a world where you can actually love your DXP. So let's get right to the beginning of it here. Dennis, first principles. Can you explain to us what a DXP is?
Yeah, I love that we start by breaking down the acronyms because we're in a space that's full of so many. And I get into a habit of just rattling them off and folks' eyes glaze over. So yeah, let's get right into what is a DXP. It stands for Digital Experience Platform. So we chopped off the E because it's not so cool and wanted to use the X. So Digital Experience Platform. And it's a superset of what Gartner used to call the WCMS or Web Content Management System space. Gartner decommissioned the WCMS part of their Magic Quadrant in 2019. But the digital experience platform is what WCMS was, plus some other sort of marketing-like features, so marketing automation, analytics, personalization, and those sorts of things.
Great. Now we're going to see here the Back to the Future trilogy are some of my favorite movies ever, and that even includes number 3. I will go to bat for that one. I will never give up a chance to use it in a discussion. But Dennis, how does the movie Back to the Future tell us a bit about where we are with the current state of the DXP?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting thing to bring up, and I love that movie. No matter what Mike was shaking his head, he doesn't agree with you, but we all know Mike has terrible taste in pop culture, so that's all okay. No, Back to the Future relates to this. So the static web is great again in many ways. The whole composable and Jamstack space made the static web cool again. We started out with the static web in the late 80s. So folks like Ken and I who are old enough to remember when HTML and the World Wide Web was just birthed. That was the static web. It was static HTML. It was images, some JavaScript files and style sheets a little bit later on, but it was pretty much fixed. Then later on, we started in, around 93 or so. We had CGI, or the Common Gateway interface, and more dynamic sorts of web pages. So by dynamic, it means it's created on the server. All right, so the web server somewhere else grabs some code and it puts some data together and with that code, and it generates that HTML and all that stuff. So that was dynamic web, or Web 2.0. Then we evolved to a place where we wanted to be able to do that using systems and the web content management systems of the late 90s, the EPI servers, Documentum, Interwoven, those sorts of things came into the enterprise space. And then Steve Jobs went and invented the iPhone, right? And the whole mobile revolution and the mobile first sort of paradigm sort of broke out. We have this Web 3.0 time. We have an interactive dynamic web, and we start to see this rise of some of the first headless content platforms. Why? Because with the mobile first sort of thinking, or just mobile thinking and mobile apps becoming more important, we realized we needed to do content across different sorts of channels, and it wasn't just about the web channel anymore. And so it was really, I think it was the iPhone that broke the old WCMS model and started to have us then move towards headless omni-channel. That means many different channels, sort of strategies and marketing. And that gave rise to where we are today. And I add to that, one of the latest advents to that, going along with this composable way of thinking, has also been Jamstack. So that is JavaScript, APIs, and markups, which is going along with this headless philosophy. And that is really what then generates, in a lot of cases, people use Jamstack techniques to generate static web pages out of that dynamic background. So that's how we get static web back again. And the web, of course, the static web was something that was characterized by being super fast because they're just static files. Things got bloated, and now we're bringing back that static web. That's why I guess you've used this Back to the Future reference, but that's what it's all about in a long-winded sort of way.
And I think when we look at the next screen here, this is going to start to speak a little bit to that maybe period between where we were, which is where we kind of are. There was this idea of the monolith, the all-in-one. What I like to say for those in the United States, particularly, almost like the triple play of cable, internet, and phone. And then there's the composable. So when we hear these terms, monolith and composable, what do they mean and how do they come into play in this discussion?
Right. So a monolithic platform is one where all of the pieces are tightly coupled with each other. Right. So that was kind of at the heart of Gartner's definition of DXP back in the day. They talked about them as a well-integrated and cohesive set of technologies. So that monolith was where things were very tightly coupled. One piece of the platform was very closely tied to the other. And the appeal of that was that the integration was supposed to just work, right? So you didn't have to go and do all of the some assembly yourself. It was supposed to just all work together. So that was the monolithic sort of philosophy. And over time, as we got more sophisticated with our marketing, we stacked more and more capability on top of that monolith. So it got bigger and bigger and more bloated. Now that we're talking about, we removed the headless, the content platform from that monolith when we started talking about headless omni-channel platforms. We started to, when that happened, it pretty much broke the monolith. It started to decompose the monolith. And in many ways, that kind of pulling out of that one component from that whole, it emphasized the modular nature of this approach, or the potential for a modular sort of approach to how we put together a digital experience platform. Perhaps it didn't have to be all so tightly coupled. Perhaps we could as well just have things with more single areas of responsibility, as we do in solid kind of architecture principles, and have more of a modular approach to the overall platform. So it's a philosophical shift where we're trying to take a little bit of a more loosely coupled rather than tightly and well integrated, and more just loosely coupled connected approach towards building the platform. And we've also had that kind of be synonymous as well, most lately, with lighter weight SaaS-based approach, or software as service approaches as well, where the whole of these whole components can live, on the web as a service.
When we talk about the decoupling aspect of the monolith, why don't we get into a little bit of what some of those elements of the stack, of the tech stack, are? Like, what comprises a digital experience platform?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned before, the digital experience platform is a superset of web content management systems. So the stuff that was part of WCMS is a necessary part of the core function of a DXP. So content authoring is going to be core. Content delivery will be core to that. So getting the content, authoring it, delivering it to the customer, that certainly is the core part of WCMS. But when does it become an experience platform is when we start to talk about the customer experience parts of that. So customer experience is really a conversation. It's a two-way dialogue. So it's no longer, I just put this content out here. It has to be able to speak and interact with the customer. And any good conversation is about listening as well as speaking. So We want to be able to listen in the platform. So then we add things like customer experience analytics. We start to track the things that the customer is doing. We get analytics about how the content is being consumed. And the platform should respond by personalizing the experience for the customer, the content that the customer will see at the web channels, at the endpoint of the web channel. And I say as well, the last thing though, is the P, platform. I mean, it is a platform. So at its core, it's also got to be extensible as well. So those are the core things. I think the authoring, delivery, analytics, and personalization, and the extensibility is really what's core to it, making it a DXP.
And just as a quick follow-up, Dennis, when we're thinking about why the monolith, why the all-in-one broke up, it's partially because on the market, a Google Analytics might outpace an analytics being created by a company that specializes in something else. An email experience platform might not be able to stand up against a specialized MailChimp or a Constant Contact. And in some ways, is that the marketplace helping this composable shift as well?
Absolutely. There's a lot of innovative people who have dedicated their lives to building companies that do nothing but email and analytics, and folks who are really specialized. You've heard the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. That's the danger of trying to build a monolithic DXP. You'll try to do everything, and you can't possibly do everything, very well, extremely well. It does take, you might build your company out and have very large units, but ultimately you need leadership that thinks differently in different areas and makes different sorts of decisions to get the innovation that you need to have really best of breed on those platform components. So it's hard for every aspect of a monolithic DXP to stand up in the marketplace against some other more specialized rivals and options, for sure.
Great. So now that we have talked about the technology, let's talk about the business organization. We are probably all familiar with the acronyms we see here, but to level set our conversation, Dennis, can you explain CMO, CTO, and CFO and what their general roles are within their organizations?
Yeah, sure. They're part of what we're typically called the C-suite. It's going to include another acronym, the CEO, who's the chief executive officer who's running the whole organization, charge of strategy and everything else. And I'll say as an aside, as a digital strategist, I don't see the C-suite often enough. So it's really somebody who we'd love to see more around the table when we're talking about digital experience. But the CEO leads up the C-suite, and the chief marketing officer, or CMO, that's what that stands for, is in charge, of course, of the marketing operations for the organization, the strategy for its customer experience, making sure people know who you are and why they should be interacting with you, with your organization. The CTO is going to look after the technological best interests of the company as it comes to, the infrastructure, its security, its scalability, their ability to recover from disaster. All of those sorts of things. And oftentimes application development comes under the purview of the CTO as well. It can happen with marketing, but typically under the CTO would run application development. And CFO, of course, for the financial interests of the company. He's going to make sure, he or she is going to make sure that the company is fiscally responsible. They are going to make sure you watch their money and you make all of the right decisions to keep you stable.
All right. Now let's look into, now that we've had those definitions, and we will look forward as well in our chat to see if these ring true with the audience or if we see other applications for these. But let's look into how these people, him, her, they, interact with a digital experience platform. So Dennis, can you talk a little bit about the CMO and the DXP, what the main concerns and pain points for that team and department?
Sure. The CMO and their team is going to really be wondering, do the tools that we have the ability to execute the strategy that we're envisioning? So that's really going to be their chief concern. Can my people use these tools effectively? When it comes to comparing, we talked about monoliths versus the new composable direction. There are a lot of tools out there that their team may want to use and might already be accounted for in the monolithic system. So there can be duplication, and you might feel like, we can't go and, invest in this other analytical tool if analytics is already built into my platform. So there's a lot of overlap of tools that they might be looking at when we're talking about the monolithic system, and they might not, and again, have the best of breed tools. When we're talking about a composable approach for the CMO, one of their challenges might be, well, where's my WYSIWYG going to go? Because I've just heard Dennis talk about headless, for example, and there is a lot of good news out there for the CMO on that front too. A lot of these headless approaches, including those by some of the partners on this call as well, take care of things like page composition. So you're not going to necessarily lose that when you go those other sorts of approaches, but these are things that the CMO is going to be interested in when it comes with their DXP. One thing I will say about the composable approach and the CMO is, just like we talked about the components of the platform being best of breed, when I challenged you with the, where's my WYSIWYG thing, it was because oftentimes we find content managers who have to also be UX experts and compose pages and write content and do the analytics. And it really means that you start to have to, as a CMO, to hire some unicorns who know a little bit of everything, as opposed to taking a different sort of approach where we'll let UX experts deal with UX and content writers just with content and analytics people just with analytics. So it enables you to have more specialized, nimble, focused teams. So it does require a change in your thinking as a CMO with how you'll interact with your team. But I think it's one that leads to greater agility for sure.
Great. And let's look towards the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. What is keeping her up at night?
Well, for the CTO, and it's really going to be about the complexity. She's going to wonder about the complexity of the infrastructure, the costs of the infrastructure that will be involved with the DXP, and the technical resources. How easy is it to come by the expertise that we need to be able to execute the dreams that marketing just put in front of me? So for the CTO, those are the things that are going to be foremost in her mind. Monoliths, certainly the monolithic approach is going to be not attractive in the sense that it's one product, but certainly tends to have greater infrastructure costs and that sort of a thing if we're talking about the typical on-prem models. For composable, again, there are a lot of advantages typically associated with SaaS offerings, and having the ability then to pick things that are a little bit more secure sometimes when we're talking about static web delivery. So secure, scalable delivery at the edge. Those are things that are going to be really at top of mind for that CTO.
And lastly, and debatably the most important, because it's where the money is, but how does the CFO intersect with a digital experience platform?
Well, plainly paying for it and wondering, is there value in the thing that we are paying for? One thing that I will note is also they're going to be more and more interested in what's the ongoing commitment. Mike on the call pointed out a few days ago an article in CIO Wire where it was that organizations, certainly after the pandemic, have been shifting more towards operational expenditures or OpEx rather than CapEx expenditures. And that's interesting in this composable versus monolith or SaaS discussion as well, in that SaaS is typically something you're going to pay with your OpEx. You're going to pay monthly for over a long period of time. And the sorts of approaches towards digital experience that I find to be most appealing, I think lend itself well to that as well. So the CFO is going to be wondering about paying for it, whether it's going to be a large upfront capital expenditure, or if it's going to be something a little bit more consistent that I can stretch out over time. And to me, the composable mindset and evolutionary thinking lends itself well to that.
Great. So we've spoken about these three roles, and then perhaps when we bring in the C-suite that you spoke of in general, how should they interact and make decisions? I've heard you talk a lot about the 5 Ps. Can you explain those, and do those come into play here?
Sure, absolutely. Like I said, it's the C-suite are folks I would love to have around the table when we're talking digital experience a lot more. The 5 Ps that you mentioned are used as a kind of a rallying point when we get those decision makers around that table, so we can get some alignment about where we're going to go. They are purpose. What's the purpose of your organization? What are you trying to achieve? What is your mission? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? Certainly, these two things are really, driven by a lot of the executive decisions, and they should be present and owning that. Then who are the people involved? So it is purpose, problem, the people, the processes, and then the platform. And you'll notice that I put platform as the last thing. So we consider all of these more important things before we start picking platform tools. And that's how you start to build these cross-functional discussions with the team. What is our mission? Who's the audience we're trying to reach? What sort of discussions do we want to have with them? What sort of data points are there? How is my team going to work with that? And only then do we start to pick the building blocks that we're going to use to build our digital experience platform.
Great. So we spoke about the DXP, and we've kind of spoken about the love part, but let's really maintain the love. To maintain this love, how often does an organization need to check in on their processes, on their software choices, the elements of the composable stack, and do those reviews need to include all of these parties?
Do the reviews need to include all of these parties? Absolutely. Certainly not on every, you're not going to get the C-suite on every meeting, and you shouldn't try to. But I think the C-suite, I love the idea of a center of excellence for an organization's digital experience, because ultimately digital experience touches on almost every aspect of a large enterprise today. So to have all of the key decision makers around the table, at least quarterly, I think makes a lot of sense. Certainly initially in this kind of 5 Ps discussion that we talked about, then quarterly to revisit those and to make important gated yes, no decisions that we should have talked about in those initial meetings. But the center of excellence as well, monthly. I think monthly you want to be guided. It's a conversation with the customer, right? So conversations change. It's not just, the topics change. And if you're still saying the same thing with your digital experience, while the customer has moved on, you will be left behind. And so, yeah, it is a constant review process. I think there needs to be ongoing attention paid to the analytics on an ongoing basis by the marketing team in particular. But certainly the Center of Excellence should get together monthly to kind of review where are we going, and quarterly to make some important pivots and involve your technology partners at that time, because your heads down with your customers and you need to know what is new on the marketplace that can help us keep exploring the possibilities that are open to us.
Great. Dennis, lastly, one of the key selling points of Composable DXP is that you are not locked into a vendor and switching costs are minimal. That is a great benefit, but as a large organization, even easy change can be hard. How do you assess when it is actually time to change, to pivot, as you said?
Well, I think, first of all, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Pay attention to what you have and use and evolve what you have to adapt to the conversation. So I think that's the first thing. We should not think that massive change is good for any organization. And so we'll want to make sure that we make change slowly. But certainly when there is pain, that's a good indication that there should be some change. If you're a CMO and you're wondering why everything is taking so long, or a CTO and everything is too complex and unsecure, or CFO and it's way too expensive and that's causing you pain, that's a good sign. It might be time for a little bit of change, but certainly make a lot of those decisions carefully and in a considered way. along your decisions and get together and talk to each other, certainly.
Perfect. Thanks, Dennis. So let's just kind of distill some of the elements here that we've covered. So we talked about DXP standing for Digital Experience Platform. Its history, that we're actually back where maybe we started with an interregnum of a monolith. We talked about some of the core functions, namely content management, personalization, email, analytics, and CDP, or content delivery. We talked about the monolith versus composable. I always like the triple play versus just get the internet, have Netflix, have YouTube TV, compose your own television watching experience. We spoke about how the chief marketing officer, chief technology officer, chief financial officer interact with a DXP and how they interact with each other in relation to the DXP. And we discussed the importance of road mapping, review, and change management, especially in such an agile and really changing marketplace. Great. So one quote here that just came out about 2 weeks ago today. It was in CMS Wire, and it was by Irina Guseva of Gartner. And it really hits home on some of the topics that we will be discussing as we move forward. So we kind of talk about today as being the DXP 101 for those in school, right? But we're going to start to talk about how you can decouple from an all-in-one, and that it's an evolution, not revolution. And this quote was really great. So moving from monolithic to composable is a journey. It starts with composable business and composable thinking before the industry can move on to composable DXP. Did you want to just hit on that quick, Dennis?
Absolutely. I want to be in Irina's amen corner on that one, because it's just so wise. It goes along with what I said just earlier before we wrapped up, Matt, that you do need to make these changes in a considered way, taking into account your people and processes, and then gradually evolve and change the mindset. Digital experience is not something you do every 3 years when you're forced to re-platform. It is something that should be an operational evolution, and rather than a revolution. We know that revolutions have martyrs, and you don't want your team, your organization, your job to be on the chopping block of anybody's revolution. You would rather just want to evolve over time. So I'm in Irene's corner on this one, and we're going to look forward to talking with people about how they can slowly start that sort of evolution of their platforms.
Great. So just with a little bit of a community bulletin board before we have a little coffee and chat here, just to let you know about some of the upcoming events we have. Next week, a week from today at 12 p.m., we're going to have Predicting the Future of Composability with Dean Barker from Optimizely. He's the director of content management there, and I love his brain. He's a great teacher and loves a good metaphor. The next day, we're going to have our inaugural DX Café Toastmasters Club meeting. I might just have Dennis say a quick word about that, because it's kind of his baby.
Oh yeah, Toastmasters is a great organization, one of the world's leading organization for public speaking and leadership skills. I'm a Toastmaster myself for many years, and it's probably one of the best dollars you can spend for professional development dollars that you can spend individually or as an organization. So I'm hoping that people in our DX Cafe community will join the club and begin that journey of learning for all of us.
Great. And then we actually have an in-person networking event at the end of the month, May 26th, 5 p.m. at Amsterdam Brewhouse, right on the lakefront there in Toronto. So if anybody is around or has any interest in coming by, it's going to be a great event. Right now we have, I think, content, ultra commerce, and search stacks on board to host with us. So we're really looking forward to that. And lastly, two ongoing things. If you would like to present or discuss, have a conversation with us or with yourselves, because this is a community, on these kind of noontime Wednesday events, if you would, have a call for papers and topics just to submit, and those can be for these, or really the Toastmasters Club could be really useful for that as well, to help with some of the grammar and things like that. Lastly, community spotlight. We really want to spotlight the members of the community and the professionals doing things the right way, working with community. So we would like if you would nominate your favorite pros. So kind of the submissions are for your thing. Community spotlight is to nominate, pay it forward to others. And we weren't able to get our QR code on here in time, but as we move to our next screen, I might show a QR code if if the opening presents itself. So thank you, everybody. And what are we drinking? For coffee.
Coffee. I swear it's coffee in here.
That's right.
Yes.
So
I'm a water guy, so I'm cheers to.
Cheers. Nice to see. I see Mark here. The Marks, Mr. Lamont, and Surveys, which I haven't seen in quite a while. Well, actually, I've never met Mr. Surveys. He's been part of the virtual community. I'm sure others have.
Absolutely.
I like the Dennis and Matt. First of all, thanks. That was really great info as always. And the more I hear about this composable stuff, I think it makes total sense. I mean, if you're moving in the direction of breaking up the monolith, but when you start getting into specialties, right? We're now, have the UX guy do the UX thing, have that content person focus solely on content so that they get the best content out there for the customer best experience. So I like where that's going, and that was a revelation, or something I took away today, was that it just makes sense that you want your best of your best doing what they're gifted at, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difference in thinking, though, because I know that most of the monolithic space. I mean, a lot of, for example, we work with Sitecore quite a bit. A lot of folks in the Sitecore XP space are used to using the page editor there. Yeah. So they actually have content authors who are using the page editor and laying out the pages, and sometimes doing HTML. And they need to be able to use the analytics in person. So you have like one person in a lot of these organizations who's trying to do a lot of different things. Now, that might just come down to not having the money to have the headcount to have people specialize in areas, right? So perhaps you do need. We're not going to be saying that all-in-one is just for nobody, right? There are organizations who are going to who need a WordPress or a Wix. That makes the most sense for them, and it's a little bit more agile for them because they have one person who needs to do everything, and so it goes. But if you're trying to build a really more agile enterprise, like an enterprise is a large complex system, and everybody who knows things about large complex systems, whether they're systems made of people or machine parts, they'll know that it's better to have areas of responsibility for the system that you can understand and control and have things specialized. So that modular thinking is the only way to reliably build a large complex enterprise, right? So you have to start change the way you think if you're going to be doing digital marketing at the enterprise level. Where's my WYSIWYG is not really a question that shows an understanding of that fact, but it's not the person's fault. I think we need to do a better job explaining that to our customers.
Yeah, and I think the end goal there too is just to make sure that those big organizations are agile, right, and flexible, and can pivot and adjust, as Matthew mentioned earlier, to the ever-changing marketplace and the customer expectations.
Absolutely. Agile, though, I mean, maybe I'd love to hear with folks who've had the same experience as I, but sometimes when I say agile in a business sort of meeting, it's like a dirty word. I think a lot of developers and engineers or solution architects and so forth will understand, a lot of the benefits of Agile. But if I talk to an enterprise project manager, sometimes they think it just means, well, there's no end to the budget, or I never know when it's going to be done.
No structure, no planning.
No structure, no plan. And that's what Agile means. And when you grow up and learn to put together a proper plan, give me a call. But that's the sense that I get. I don't know how much has anybody else kind of gotten that kind of shade for using the word.
If I can call out, I don't know, Jason Miller, are you available to say anything? I just would love him to introduce himself, because he actually works in the enterprise. So I don't know if you want to just introduce yourself to the community, Jason. I'm putting you on the spot, but you're my friend, so I feel like I can.
That's what friends do.
He might, yeah. Oh, did we lose him?
Jay's gone to the washroom.
Yeah. No, well, there's one point. I know I feel like we've name checked Mike a bunch of times because his video is on.
Yeah.
And but I like the metaphor that you've made in the past in relation to this, that the enterprise has specialization, whereas building a WordPress site, Wix, Squarespace for a small and medium business, which is more than enough for them. It's not to say it's a bad thing, but you have the metaphor about kind of the busker, right? Who can play all of the instruments. They got the guitar, they got the harmonica, they have the drum with their feet, and that's unbelievably amazing. But then kind of the enterprise composable is more like the symphony, right? There's all the specialists, and it's a very high level. It has the conductor and the full orchestra. So I thought, not to speak about, because buskers are amazing, right? But there's a time and place. I've liked that metaphor.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor, actually.
All right. Well, does anyone want to say what their favorite? I'll tell my little coffee story. I have a great place in town called Cloveberry, and my wife picked up my coffee today, and the owner said, I'm giving Matt a special bold one to kind of QA test it to see how it is. And it was pretty tremendous. Ken, you drink water though, right? Dennis, you like Nespresso, I think.
I'm an espresso junkie. Yeah. So way too much. And we're definitely going to take it with us. I go through a lot of that stuff for sure.
Yeah.
I like my Tennessee whiskey though. I can't lie there.
Well, it's a little early for Tennessee whiskey.
Exactly.
Wink, wink. What nudge?
Yeah. Are the I don't know. Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was good. I think we're close to our time, but that was I really appreciate everyone. I think it was hopefully a good start, set the stage, get some on-demand action on it.
Yeah. I want to thank you for everybody who's come out, and please do share with your networks when we do the next ones. And if you have things to present yourselves, we would love to have you, and please join us for the Toastmasters Club stuff that's coming up. You're going to get some the sign-up sheets for that posted on LinkedIn and Twitter. For the Conobos people here, we got you covered. For the other people, you can pay for yourselves, or you can get your boss to cover you. That would be really good. All right.
Thanks everyone.
Great job. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Matt.